Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television is sponsored by Nutrien. Nutrien, feeding the future.
Hello everyone and welcome to Perspective. This is a public affairs presentation of Florida Gateway College. My name is Mike McKee and my guests on the program are going to talk about a very difficult subject to talk about, human trafficking. We have Savannah Parview. She is a leader and a survivor. We have Shauna Adams-Ferries, who represents the Taskforce here locally. And we have Corporal Alan Wilkett from the Pasco Sheriff's Office, who has become sort of an expert in this field. We're going to talk to them about what human trafficking is, what you can do to get out of it, and how to spot it, and perhaps call law enforcement. We'll do that when we come back. Don't go away.
Action!
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television. We'd also like to welcome the listeners to WQHL and WCJX Radio. We thank them for being with us today. Human trafficking has become a problem, and we're going to find out a little bit about it with our guest on the program today. We have Savannah Parview, who is a survivor of human trafficking, who got out. Corporal Alan Wilkett from the Pasco Sheriff's Office here in Florida, where the problem, I guess in all of Florida, it's become quite a problem. And we have Shauna Adams-Ferries. She's a special project coordinator of this task force that is looking into this and spreading the word. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Corporal Wilkett, I guess you're the expert because you probably see this a lot or have been exposed to it, being from an area just north of Tampa where the population is a lot bigger than we have here in Lake City. But just exactly what is human trafficking?
So we're now celebrating the 20th year of the TVPA, which is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act is what framed up human trafficking 20 years ago on a federal level. So it defines it in several different ways, but kind of a street language, a street definition is when one person takes advantage of another person for a commercial gain, that is human trafficking. And that issue of human trafficking is global, it's national, and it's also local. And that's why we need to address this from all three levels.
When you're talking about some sort of gain, controlling someone, what are we talking? Are we talking about moving drugs from point to point? Are we talking prostitution? What exactly is it, or is it a combination of all of that?
It's a combination of all that. So really what we're looking for is exploitation. So when you exploit the vulnerability of another person, we all have vulnerabilities, but when that gets exploited for commercial gain, so it can be prostitution, it can be brothels, it can be street tracks or blades as they call them on sex trafficking, but it can be also labor or involuntary servitude. And all three of those forms kind of wrap around this thing that we call human trafficking.
Savannah, I know you're a very brave individual and that you were involved in this. You look relatively young. At what point did you become ensnared in this human trafficking?
I began being trafficked when I was 11.
Very vulnerable. Can you give us the circumstances in that? I mean,
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to put you on the spot or make you feel uncomfortable because I know, again, it's difficult to even speak about it, and you're very brave to do so, and especially in this setting here. But what were the circumstances?
My mom was a drug addict and alcoholic, and she would go and prostitute herself for drugs. And there was a time when I was 11 that I went with her, and her drug dealer offered her $10 for me instead of for her. And so they gave her a $10 piece of crack, and then they would take and sell me to other people and bring me home or send me home whenever they were done.
At 11, that is quite a traumatic experience. At what point did you get away from it? Or was it after you left the house? I mean, it would seem like you'd want to run away and get away from this sad situation.
Well, it's like I was with my mom from 11 to 13, and then I went to foster care from 13 to 15, and I was trafficked while I was in foster care because the staff at the group home that I was at were friends with my mom's drug dealer who was my trafficker. And it wasn't until I went to live with my oldest brother when I was 15 and a guidance counselor stepped in, and I ended up living with her and her family, and like that's how I got out of it consistently.
Corporal Wilkett, what are the chances that foster care would be part of this web? I mean, is that unusual circumstance?
No.
Or,
yeah, foster care is one of the feeders into this, and it doesn't mean that all foster care is bad, but there's a certain element within that foster care system. So it can be community kids or system kids. They get brought into that because they may be runaways, throwaways. That creates vulnerability, so they get kind of put into, so they bring all that vulnerability with them when they go into the foster care system. And if there's not that guidance or that ability to kind of wrap ourselves around them and close down those vulnerabilities, the exploitation within that system becomes paramount.
now, do a lot of these instances occur with boyfriends, with girlfriends that, you know, maybe I'm the best you're going to do, you better do what is that sort of how this comes about in some circumstances?
In sex trafficking, we have two different elements. We have an adult sex trafficking, and then we have minor sex trafficking. Certainly in both of those, we see that intimate partner as kind of the pimp, or kind of the one who's putting that person out on the street or in a brothel or in a strip club and selling them for money. So we have that in both the adult side and the minor side, but in the minor side, having that friend who kind of befriends them out on the street, or having an intimate partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, or sometimes family members. That familial pimping is becoming really big as well, where family members themselves, as Savannah has just said, is actually pimping them out for something, whether it be drugs or whether it be money. They're being pimped out by their own family. So we see those three sides.
How desperate is someone like that? That's almost, you know, you're sitting at home watching this on our station right now, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how, you know, circumstances make you desperate? Is that sort of how this all evolves?
Well, I think we see two things really in play. In many cases, we see mental health issues, but we see drug addictions, and drug addictions is really big in this space. So again, that just opens up the vulnerabilities that sometimes are pre-existing, but it magnifies that by a drug addiction or by a mental health issue. So absolutely, those two things are absolutely in play when it comes to trafficking. But on the other hand, there are some of those that are street pimps or street traffickers, or traffickers that are even in those higher levels of organizational crime. So organized crime, they're doing it strictly for greed. These vulnerable victims, to them, is nothing but a piece of property that they brand and then throw out there to be consumed.
And you're in Pasco County, north of Tampa. So you see the problem is really big down there, but you say it's big all over the state.
It is. So we look at Tampa, the Tampa Bay area, and we kind of operate in an 8-county task force footprint, and it's a big problem there. But I think anywhere that you go in the state of Florida, Florida is the 3rd highest reporting state in the nation.
For human trafficking?
For human trafficking. So we report to the Polaris Project, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, at the 3rd highest rate. It's all over our state.
Let me ask, Corporal, why? Why Florida? Is it because of our population? Is our transient population? Because we have so many people coming in and out on the interstate, coming from northern climates where it's warmer for them to come down here? Is that, I mean, I would hope that would be some of it, and we just don't have bad people here.
Yeah, you hit on one of those. So that transient population, We have great weather, so people, naturally, tourism is a big driver for our state. So that brings that conducive climate as well. But we also have major league sporting events. We got the Super Bowl coming both this year and next year, this year in Miami, next year in Tampa, bringing in large populations. Well, the trafficker brings in their stables and puts them out around those big populations. So anytime you have those large events that come to a state, great weather, high tourism, high-end hotels, beaches and climate, all those things work together to kind of bring that climate.
And again, you mentioned Super Bowl, and you've got big money people who are the only ones who seem to be able to afford it, and they're the ones that have the money, and I guess that's where these guys go, because they know there's big money to be made. I mean, and I think you've got casinos down at Hard Rock Hotel down there, so there's all types of things that. And Sean, I want to ask you, people may be scratching their head going, well, why is a guy from Pasco County here talking? It's here, isn't it?
It is here. It is here. Corporal Wilkett is a subject matter expert on it, and we're always happy to have him come and tell us in real terms what it is that we're facing. But here in our 7 counties that we serve in our task force, there is a case of human trafficking in each one. Columbia County, Hamilton County, Levy, Gilchrist, the 7 counties that we serve. Now, our task force is based here in Columbia County in part because of your Sheriff Mark Hunter, and he really has taken a lead in making sure that we spread the word and do just what we're doing today, bringing awareness to the problem. In our area, we find both the sex work and, just like in Savannah's case, it's not high end, it's $10 in some cases. And in some cases, it's not even money, there are goods exchanged. But we also find the servitude aspect of it very heavily in our area. We are an agricultural area, so we have agricultural workers, migrant workers, and such, and that is a vulnerable population. The servitude in homes, when you have domestic workers. We hear on the news about people who have not paid taxes on an employee that's in their home. That's human trafficking. And so every type of human trafficking that we see in Pasco is here in Columbia, it's in Hamilton, it's everywhere. And that's why we are so active in this area and are very happy and grateful to have Corporal Wilkett and Savannah come and share their stories to bring awareness to the people here.
Well, and I think I know Mark Hunter pretty well, and I think the more you let it go by not doing anything, not calling attention to it, then people say, well, they're doing it. Did you see that, Corporal?
Absolutely. So the real strategy that we have to employ, especially on the law enforcement judicial side, so for the law enforcement, we have to have a strategy of ground taking. So we have to take the ground that these traffickers feel comfortable operating in. So whether that be in strip club environments, whether it be on street tracks that are known for prostitution, whether it be in our agriculture fields, our hotels and motels, wherever that space is that traffickers feel comfortable, and now it's moving online. We estimate that about 60% of recruiting and grooming, and then the transaction itself, is happening now online. Not from a street window where a car rolls up and does a sidewalk transaction, but now we're seeing that online transactions happening. So we got to get in that space and do ground taking and shut down those spaces.
Well, and how dangerous is it? I mean, when you think about online, you think about 10, 11, 12-year-old girls, boys, whatever, are online. They don't really know. Again, you're very naive when you're that young. You don't have the critical thinking skills to know that so is that how it starts as well?
Without a doubt. So gaming systems is big right now. Your Xbox Ones, your PlayStation 4s, anything that has a chat function within the gaming system itself. So they'll start the recruiting and grooming process through the chat, and then they move it to an app. And so they may move it to a WhatsApp or to a Wicker or to a Kick. So someplace where there's kind of an encrypted service on a map. So they start with a gaming system, they start with a Roblox or Minecraft, anything to get that connection and start building that rapport. And so once they have the recruiting and the grooming stage begin, now they move it to another means of communication that they can stay off the grid and start that conversation.
Okay, you've given me a great thought here to think, good Lord, that's horrible. Child sex abusers, is that part of this, Savannah? That there are child pornographers out there that are looking to find their next victim, and they're going this way, this route as well?
I think it helps fuel trafficking, because the more they watch it, the more they want it, and so they're going to go buy it. But it's also children are being recruited to make pornography as well.
So that's part of this as well. They could be.
Definitely.
I tell you what, a very interesting conversation, pretty sad conversation that we're having to have here to inform you about sex trafficking, human trafficking, all kinds of trafficking of individuals. We're going to take a break here on Perspective. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation and how you can help break the spell of human trafficking when we come back. Don't go away.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television. You just saw a public service announcement on getting your diploma. How much of a lack of education or dropping out of school, and anyone you can answer this, plays a role in human trafficking?
Well, anytime there's a barrier, and not having an education, not learning critical thinking skills is a barrier. Not being in an environment where you're taught self-esteem and are given opportunities to demonstrate that by getting good grades, participating in activities, definitely is a barrier. However, we also encounter victims in this life who are in school and have been in school and graduate, and that during their entire career in school were being trafficked. We even have another survivor who tells the story of her going to her 7th grade health class, and the teacher was one of her customers.
Oh, wow.
So this problem, human trafficking, doesn't discriminate, not by age, socioeconomic level, education level, race. None of those things are one more than the other. There are more vulnerable populations, but we see it across the board.
You know, you're telling me something about someone keeping a secret during your high school years, which has got to be emotionally, I mean, there's got to be some mental health issues with these children that become adults down the line. How are you doing now? I mean, Savannah, again, you're very brave to be able to come out here and talk about it, and because I know what your end thing is to raise awareness. So that, how are you doing now?
I'm doing well. I still have struggles, but I went to therapy for several years. Or a couple of years.
Now, did you blame yourself? I mean, was there
Yeah,
a thought in
well,
your head that this is all my fault? And I think maybe that may be the way people stay in it, because they're thinking it's just I'm not worth it.
Well, I was always told that it was my fault, and I would be in trouble if I told. And so I always felt like, I was too afraid to talk about it. But I also didn't want anybody to know what happened to me, because I was afraid they were going to see me the same way that I learned to see myself. And so I didn't want anybody to know the things that happened to me because I was too ashamed of it.
But you've gotten over that, obviously, because you're talking about it now.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you?
When I learned what human trafficking was, that it wasn't my fault what happened to me, and that I could talk about it.
Knowing that other people were going through the same situation that you were, you weren't alone in all this.
Yeah.
What about services for people that are trying to get out?
Well, of course, our task force. which can be reached through the Columbia County Sheriff's Office. There's also the Polaris Project, which I have their number here. If you see someone that you think is a victim, there is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 888-373-7888.
I think we're going to have a slide at the end of the program
Awesome.
with those numbers,
Awesome.
those numbers on it.
But we say, you know, just like with a terrorist activity, if you see something, say something.
You know, I was just going to ask you that. How do people report it? Because you don't want to be a busybody and say you're in somebody's business. You know, I think so many in this culture now, you know, I'm not going to get involved. I don't want to get involved because I may be causing grief for someone. What is a good rule of thumb for you as an officer to hear from the community?
So from the law enforcement perspective, we would rather somebody report something and let us take a look at it, and it turned out to be nothing, but it's that one that turns out to be something. So we want to make sure it's being reported, whether that's a crime in progress, which is a 911 call, or the call to the National Human Trafficking Hotline if you just suspect something is happening. Some of us have crime tips numbers from our sheriff's office or police departments, and there's ways to report online as well. We have submit tips and things of that nature. But here I think is kind of the critical point that everybody needs to think about. We have involuntary servitude, forced labor, sex trafficking as three major forms of human trafficking. But right on the horizon are things like organ trafficking, where people are being slaughtered for their organs and being sold on the black market. This is happening just off of our shores. And if we don't start saying something when we see something, these are the types of activities that's coming next. So we have to get our arms wrapped around what we're dealing with now, or we're going to be opening ourselves up to these things. So we all have to take that extra step and become involved. Because if you're not involved now, you will be involved in the future.
How do you get out of it, Sean? I mean, well, maybe you can tell me how you get out of it. At what point did someone help you? Did someone say, this is crazy, you're coming with me, and they saved you?
No, I had to realize that my mother was never going to be the person I needed her to be. And I had other people in my life. But then I also had to get help and learn how to not be a victim, because being a victim was all that I knew.
Was there somebody that you reached out to?
I started going to therapy.
But that's expensive.
Yeah.
Was there a law enforcement agency that you dealt with, or an organization, Taskforce, like we're talking about back in the day?
No.
You just did it yourself.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very, very brave person to do that.
Yes.
Are there ways that people who are going through this, I mean, it can't be a pleasant life.
Not at all, not at all. When you consider that you are a piece of property, that is how you're treated, that's what you're told each and every day, that you are a piece of property. None of us, well, Savannah can, but you know, we can't imagine that or wrap our brain around that. But some services out there would be Department of Children and Family Services, DCF, our local law enforcement. There are nonprofits out there. The Attorney General, Ashley Moody, just made an announcement a couple of years ago about a statewide now initiative for human trafficking. So because we are doing just what we're doing now, raising awareness, that's going to help raise resources to help these people, these victims become survivors and then warriors. I love that Savannah is a warrior against human trafficking, not just a survivor, because she's thriving.
Right.
And her story is amazing, and we want to have more stories like that.
Now, Savannah, you were from where?
Orlando area.
The Orlando area. So you go around the state doing these type of events?
Yes.
What's been the one thing that sticks out to you, that someone's come up to you after your speech or when you've given a talk and said, hey?
It was when I first started sharing my story. There was a lady who she came back after everybody left, and she put her hands on my shoulders, and she was crying, and she said that she's 75 years old and never told anybody that her mom sold her too. And so, like, knowing what I lived through for so long and keeping it a secret, and this lady had gone her whole life without sharing.
So, and I'm assuming some people take this to the grave because it's that hurtful. Corporal, talk about quickly what you can do to protect your kids. What can you tell your kids? You got to be a spy and see what they're doing online, and how do you protect them? What do you say to them to make them aware?
So the short answer to that is yes. You have to be a spy. Parents have to be parents again, and they have to take control of the devices that we're giving to our kids, whether that's gaming systems and the phone. The smartphone is probably the #1 device now. And kids as young as 8 or 10 are getting those devices in their hands, and they've got the world in their hands at that time. And unfortunately, when you get the world in your hands, it's not always good. So parents have to take strong control of those things, making sure that we're using the proper tools that are available to us to monitor those things, to watch out for our kids, because we have to understand that a predator, his prey is your kids, and you have to protect your kids.
And nobody else is going to do it for you, for
Correct.
sure. We're going to take our last break on Perspective here on Florida Gateway College Television. When we come back, we'll close things out and find out how you can be a part of helping the issue and getting awareness out there in the community. We'll be right back.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television. I'm encouraged somewhat. I'm also very depressed because I'm learning things that I kind of had a feeling about what it was all about, but until you actually hear it and you hear that this, when you just told the story about the young lady who trafficked with her teacher, that's pretty tough. That kind of tears at you a little bit. But again, if you'd like more information, you can talk to Gateway Freedom Human Trafficking Task Force, 904-624-2804, or you can email Leslie Hersey at isfnnet.org to get more information. Again, the work that you're doing is very important, and Corporal, I appreciate you coming up here and talking to us country folk here in Lake City about human trafficking, and hopefully it's something that won't happen to your family. Again, thank you for being on the program. And thank you for watching Perspective here on Florida Gateway College Television. Until next time, I'm Mike McKee. We'll see you soon.